And so the name of this sermon is Daniel's 70th week. And as you see on the wall over there, we have a poster and basically a timeline of events. And so what is Daniel's 70th week? Well, it's a 7-year period, but I want you to see where that's at. Chapter 12 gives us a lot of timeline information as far as what's going on in this 7-year period. But I want you to first see where this is at. Go to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9, and we're going to look at from verse 24 to the end of the chapter. And so we'll see the 70th week. So why do we say 70th week? Because that's what it uses here, a week of years. So a week just means 7 of something. A lot of times we use a week as 7 days, but week can mean just a time period for years. And we know this to be true because this is a prophecy about Jesus coming, and it wouldn't make any sense if it was talking about literal weeks of like 7-day periods, because that was only like a little over a year and a half from when the decree would go forth till Jesus being crucified. And this was back before even the Cretians came around. So we know that this is talking about years. So when we say Daniel's 70th week, we're talking about the Daniel's 70th, basically 7 period time. So we'll see this. Go to Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. Verse 24. It says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. So he says 70 weeks are determined. But then he says that 7 weeks, 62 weeks. So what's that? 69 weeks. So 62 weeks is 62, plus 7 is 69. So we have all those weeks up to Jesus coming and dying on the cross. And it says from the going forth of the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. So what you have to understand, this chapter starts off with Daniel praying to God about how he promised that after 70 years of captivity in Babylon, he would bring them back in to Jerusalem. And he's praying to him about that he would fulfill that promise. Well, Jerusalem's completely decimated. The temple's completely destroyed. And if you read Ezra, that's where the temple's being rebuilt. Nehemiah's where the actual city's being rebuilt. And so there's debate on, Cyrus gave the decree to rebuild the temple. But this could be the decree to rebuild the city, which was in Nehemiah's day. Remember that the king gave him the decree to go do that. So there's 2 different decrees that were probably going forth, one for the temple and one for the city. But either way, whenever this decree was made, he said from that point, when that decree is made, there's going to be 69 weeks. Well, what is that? That's 483 years. So if you go into history and look at when this was going on, it makes sense because that's about the time when Jesus was crucified. So he's splitting that though from this last week that's going to come in the future. So keep reading there in verse 26. And I don't want to belabor this too much. I just want you to see where we get this 7-year period at. Notice it doesn't say 7 years tribulation anywhere in this chapter. This is the only place that even gives you that whole 7-year period in one sentence here. And nowhere does it say it's tribulation. So we already covered that in our sermon about Jesus coming after the tribulation, but before he pours out his wrath. Verse 26, it says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. Now you may ask yourself, why is it 62 weeks and not 7 and 62 weeks? Because notice that it says that after 7 weeks and 62 weeks, the street shall be built again. I believe that that the street and the wall and all this stuff's going to be built in 7 weeks, meaning 49 years. Now, if this is talking about the temple, do you remember how long it took them to build that new temple? At least according to the Pharisees. 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days, he says in John chapter 2. So it took them 46 years to build the temple. So if it's talking about the temple, you can see how that would fit. That's about 7 weeks, And obviously they're saying that, so it doesn't mean it's completely accurate. But anyway, so we go on, and we see that after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So we see that these 69 weeks that come up from the decree, so when Messiah is cut off, so that's when Christ dies on the cross. Remember, that ends the old covenant, right? Messiah dying, and that starts the new covenant. But then it talks about, then it goes into, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So you remember, in history, the temple and the sanctuary is all destroyed around 70 AD. Now, this is just history, but the thing is, it says the people of the prince that shall come. Does it say it's the prince that is come? Did it say that the prince that shall come is going to do that, or the people of the prince that shall come? Notice that the prince hasn't come yet at this point. It's the people of the prince that shall come. Now, you may ask yourself, well, who are those people? The children of the devil, right? And they've been here since Cain. You know, the children of the wicked one, the children of the devil, the seed of Satan, which are reprobates. Those that are the children of the devil that have been from the foundation of the world, and that'll be till the end here. They destroyed the city, and I'm sure God put it into their hearts to do it, just like he's going to do with Babylon. But we see that it's going to destroy the sanctuary. Then there's a semicolon there, and it says, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. So you see how it's split up? Because you know there is a gap between when Jesus died and when the temple was destroyed. It didn't get destroyed the day after he died, right? No one would deny that. So you have a gap between, you know, the end of these 69 weeks, the temple's destroyed and the city's destroyed, and then come at the end. So we know that this 1 week that's left is not right after the 69 weeks. Does that make sense? It couldn't be. Even if you were to say, even if you were a preterist, which is garbage, to say that Jesus, all this stuff happened back in 70 AD, you'd still have to say there's a gap between the 69 week and the 70th week. Does that make sense? Because there's still like 40 years of difference there. But I don't believe that I don't believe the 1 week has come yet. So that's something we're looking not forward to, but we're looking for in the future. And so in verse 27, this is where you get the 70th week. Verse 27, it says, and he shall come, or he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Who's the he? The prince that shall come. The Antichrist. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So we see here that there's a 7-year period where the Antichrist or the devil, they're all working together on this, are going to confirm the covenant for 1 week. So know this, that the Antichrist is going to be involved in this covenant for the whole 7 years. It doesn't mean we're going to be there for that whole time. That's where people get confused. So I have this chart over here. I have this thing, so I'm going to use it. And so I'm just going to be writing up here what's already on that board over there. So if you want something that looks good, get that, not this. So anyway, what we have here is a 7-year period. This is 7 years total. And then in the midst of that week, and I'll emphasize the midst, it doesn't say exactly the midpoint. And there's a reason why it does that. But in the midst of the week, you have the abomination of desolation. I'll put an O there. Abomination of desolation. So in the midst of that week, that 7-year period, you had the abomination of desolation. So that's what he's saying here, is that you have this week, the Antichrist is going to confirm his covenant with many for 1 week, 7 years. In the midst of that is going to be the abomination of desolation. Now we know that according to Matthew 24, that's a big event that we're going to be looking for. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, then flee into the mountains. That's not at the beginning of the 7 years, right? That's in the midst of it. So what do you have first? The beginning of sorrows, wars, rumors of wars, and all that. But I want you to see the timeline of this, because we see that now we have a 7-year period, but most of the time when it's talking about timeline, it's talking about, it breaks it up into like 3.5-year periods here and there. And there's different time periods and all that. But go to Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. And if you get anything when you're looking at this, what we have here is we have time periods that are repeated. And my handwriting's horrible, but these are all the same periods of time. when you see 1,260 days, 42 months, time, times, and half a time, it's all 3.5 years. Okay? Now you may ask yourself, why would God use all these different things? Because he knew that people were going to try to say that this 1,260 days was years. And that these are decades, or these are... Do you see what I'm saying? He used 3 different time periods and he uses them interchangeably because he knew people were going to say, this isn't really days, this isn't really months, this isn't really time, And so when you look at this, when you divide this by 30, you get 42 months. When you divide this by 12, so 30 days in a month, which I'll talk about that. That's the way they did things in the Bible. When you're looking at months, it's 30-day months. If you 30 days, divide this by 30, what do you get? 42 months. You divide the 42 months by 12 months in a year, what do you get? 3.5 years. And I guarantee the reason that God did that was because he knew that people were going to say, this isn't really days, this is years, and they're going to try to add these up and say, it's, well, at year 2000 such and such, 2300, that's when Jesus is going to come back. You see what I'm saying? So I guarantee that's why he did this, and he uses them interchangeably. So all these terms, when I see 1,260 days, I'm thinking 3.5 years. When I see 42 months, I'm thinking 3.5 years. When I see time, times, and half times, I'm seeing 3.5 years. So I'll show you that that's used interchangeably. But in Revelation 12:6, so stick with me. I know this is kind of the timeline stuff's not exactly the most exciting stuff, but I want you to see this because we saw the overview. We have tribulation, abomination, rapture, wrath is what we're going to get into. But I want you to see the timeline of this and how it's spelled out. Revelation 12 verse 6, it says, And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. 1,260. A score is 20, so 3 scores 60, right? So 1,260 days. The same thing is repeating what is said in chapter 12. And it says in verse 14, And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. So we see the 1260 is the same thing as the time, times, and half a time. Now, I want to go on with this because it goes into, so that's your first half. Here's your 1260. And I'll use the days just because that's fine, we'll just use that. So 1260 days goes up to this point, to the abomination of desolation. So we start off our 7-year period. That's where the dragon is going after all the earth. The wars, rumors of wars, pestilences, that's going after the whole earth. When you look at the seals, it's a corridor of the whole earth that's being destroyed. Then he switches gears. Up to this abomination and desolation, he's switching from everybody in all the earth to all the saved. So that's why the abomination and desolation is such an important marker, because that's where it's really hitting us at home. And so in Revelation 12, we'll stay right there for a second. In verse 15, we'll see that the serpent, the devil, is going to switch gears and going into chapter 13. So verse 15, it says, And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So we see now he's going after the Christians. He's going straight after the believers. And we go right into chapter 13 where it's talking about the Antichrist, the beast. So the beast, the Antichrist, they're the same thing. So we see the beast that's coming out of the sea. In Revelation 13, verse 1, it says, And I stood upon the sea, saying to the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. So another 3.5 years. So, and it says, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So now we see that the Antichrist is coming on the scene. And this is the abomination of desolation, where he's going to go into the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. You know, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where we see the man of sin is going to be revealed. That day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin, the son of perdition, be revealed. And that's when he's going to, you know, he as God sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Right? That's where this happens. He's going to set up the image, which is the abomination of desolation. That's where the Antichrist, now the Antichrist, I don't have time to go in this, but the Antichrist is doing stuff throughout this. Meaning he's warring, he's one of the kings that's going through here, but he's going to die. He's going to die. Remember, he had the head that was wounded, and then in chapter 17 it talks about how he's going to descend. He's going to ascend out of the bottomless pit. So he's going to die, come back to life, and that's why everybody's going to wonder after him. It's not just that he got like some wound and then he survived. No one would wonder after that. All the earth would wonder after that. No, if he died and came back to life, which is what is the Antichrist picturing? Jesus. What did Jesus do? Died, his soul was in hell for 3 days and 3 nights, and he rose again the third day. We have a false trinity in end times. You have the dragon, you have the Antichrist, and in this same chapter you have the false prophet. The dragon would be like the Father, the Antichrist would be like the Son, and the false prophet would be like the Holy Ghost. You have this wicked satanic trinity. And so anyway, that's another note. But so from the abomination of desolation, we have 42 months. Now, why do I stop right there? 42 months or another 1260. So I'll get into that. I want you to see also, you know, we were talking about that 42 months. Well, in Daniel chapter 12, it calls this time period a time, times, and half a time. So Daniel 7, verse 25. You don't have to turn there, but Daniel 7, verse 25, it says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, sound familiar? And shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Interchangeable. We'll see this with the witnesses too. Interchangeable, 42 months, 1260. So these 3.5 year periods, you know, they're the 1260, all this stuff is interchangeable. So, Daniel 12, and that's why we read this. This is where you get a lot of timeline coming through here. And why do I stop it right here? Because there's going to be another number here. If you look at 1260, these days right here, and you added those up, you would not get 7 years. And so when you see this number that we read in Daniel chapter 12, in verse, well, I'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So Daniel chapter 12 gives us a lot of time. It actually gives you the first half and the last half in Daniel chapter 12. Go back to Daniel chapter 12. And I know this is thick, so just dig in. Well, I know we're getting deep tonight. But I want to prove that chart over there to you that this is accurate, how we look at this. So what do we have? We have this 7-year period where the Prince of the Covenant, the Antichrist, is going to be doing all this stuff. The first half we see is basically the dragon trying to kill all of mankind. The abomination of desolation happens. The Antichrist is given power over the whole earth, and he's coming after us. So what we see in Daniel chapter 12 is that timeline again. So we see timeline after timeline. They all match up. They all fit together. So Daniel chapter 12 and verse 7, we already read this, but it says, he says, I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his hand and his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the people of the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. What's he talking about? Because now we have a time, half a time, and something else happening after that. So you gotta excuse my drawing skills here. So we have time, half a time, and something else is happening, where the power of the holy people are being scattered. So we have that time, half a time, which would come up to this point right here, because you have that. These are all the same times, but then he adds something to that. Well, this is where I think that 1,335 days comes in. So this whole period right here is 1,335 days. This is where I believe the rapture happens. Now, I don't have time to prove this to you necessarily, but what that would give you is a little bit of time past that abomination of desolation that we'd be here in that 7-year period. And so that's where I believe this, where it says, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. Now when you read, first of all, when you read verse 7 there, what was just talked about? There's going to be a trouble which the world hasn't seen, right? And then what does he go into? The rapture. He goes into the rapture. Then he's saying, what shall be the end of all these things? So you can see where he would be talking about this tribulation, then the rapture, and he says, what's the time frame of this? Well, he says a time, times, and half a time, and when he is, scattered all the power of the holy people. And at the end of the chapter, he's telling Daniel, hey, blessed is he that waited to the 1,335 days, because you're going to rest until you stand in your lot. Because who's going to be resurrected? Daniel's going to be resurrected at that time with all of us too. So you can see that 1,335 days is a little longer than the 1,260. So this will give you about 75 days of great tribulation. So when you look on that chart over there, you see tribulation that's going 1,260, and you have that little period in there that says great tribulation, which such as the world has never seen. Now, why does the Bible say, except those days should be shortened, no flesh should be saved? Because if we would have went this whole 7-year period, we wouldn't have survived. No one would survive. That's what he's saying. He shortened those days. The week didn't get shortened. He shortened how long we would be in it. Does that make sense? Amen. And so we have this time period right here, and that's where you see the little bit further, and that's why you get that great tribulation. So stay with me. Stay with me. So we have now in verse 12 of or verse 11 in chapter 12, we get another time frame that's starting from the abomination of desolation. And this is the 1290. So from the abomination, see how the abomination of desolation is a marker? But I'm going to prove to you why did I stop here with this? Because the 1290 goes to the very end. And you may ask, why is it 1290? Well, think about this. If you had 30-day months and you have 6 years, okay? How many days are in a normal year? 365, right? 0.25. Then we have a leap year, right? So we have a leap year, and what do? You add a day, because you're technically not going through that whole time period because you still have that 0.25 that you're missing, right? So unless you want to have winter and harvest, or like winter in the summer, you need to adjust your calendar, right? So what they would do with these 30-day 30-day months, what would that be? That'd be 360. So you're missing 5 days at the end of each year. So after 6 years, what they would have is what you'd call a leap month, where you'd add another month. Because after 6 years, how many days have you missed? 30. 6 times 5 is 30. Getting real deep on the math. So, so you'd have to add another month. See why there's an extra 30 days? Because after 7 years, you're missing 30 days. So he's filling in that extra 30 days. Now, what's interesting about this is that when the 7th trumpet sounds, there's going to be time no longer. That means that the Antichrist's power is over. But the 7 years is not done yet. Because when that 7th trumpet sounds, the Battle of Armageddon hasn't happened. Babylon hasn't fallen yet, right? If you think of the beginning of the sounding of that trumpet, there's events that have to happen, and it happens within this 30 days. Remember, Babylon falls in an hour. So this is going to happen in a short period of time. And then in the sixth vial, when it's poured out, that's when the armies are gathering to the Battle of Armageddon, so they're already on the move. When that seventh trumpet and seventh vial happens, they're going to be at the Battle of Armageddon, so that's where you have this 30-day period that the Antichrist is no longer in power, or it's been stripped from him, and he's going to go into perdition. He's going to be cast into the lake of fire. So you have a 30 days right here. So you may look when you're reading 1290, you're like, why in the world is it 1290? Why isn't it 1260? That's why. Because you got to think about how they're doing the 30-day month and the 360-day year. So you have to make up for that time period there, or that time that's being lost. So I know this is deep, my friends. So I just want you to understand that when you look at these timelines, that's what's going on. It's explaining all this, but see how it all fits together? It's all within the 7 years, and they're using the abomination of desolation in the midst. That's why it says the midst and not mid, because it's technically not the exact midpoint of that 7-year period, right? But it is pretty close. It's in the midst. It's pretty much in the midpoint of it. It's just the fact that you had that extra 30 days on the end of it that we're not seeing. So the abomination of desolation is a marker. And so there's another vision that we see where it gives us another timeline. So all this would give you enough information to understand what's going on, right? And how you have this first half, the second half. The first half's the devil trying to kill us all, kill the whole earth. The second half is where he's really going after the Christians. It's cut short because after this period of time, we're only about 75 days into that God comes back and rescues us. And Jesus comes and saves us from that great tribulation. And then God's wrath is being poured out from this point on. So God's wrath is being poured out. Why? He's still in power. Remember, there's going to be darkness over the seat of the beast in his kingdom. His kingdom's still there, and that wrath is being poured out on his kingdom while he's in power. So go to Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8. It may not take us too long to get through this because I'm just pretty much explaining this timeline. But Daniel chapter 8 gives us another little timeline here. So when you're reading through Daniel and you're reading through Revelation, you see these times. That's what's gonna happen, or what you're trying to reconcile is where does this fall in that 7-year period? They're all in that 7-year period somewhere, but what's it talking about? So Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. It says, "Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint," so that's a tongue twister right there, "which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot?" So notice first that this is talking about the daily sacrifice, the transgression of desolation where the sacrifice is going to be taken away, and when it's going to be cleansed. So there's 3 things there of what this vision is talking about. "And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." So now we have almost 3 years. 2,300 is close. It's about 6 years and 6 months, or 6 years and like 4 months. I believe this period is going from where the Antichrist is taken out of power all the way back almost to the beginning. You have this 2,300 days. And you'll say, "Pastor Robinson, what in the world is that all about?" Well, the sacrifice has to start, they have to start doing sacrifices again. This actually explains why that would even happen. Right now, no one is doing animal sacrifices in Jerusalem. But somewhere right at the beginning of this 7-year period, they're going to start sacrificing animals again. The daily sacrifice is going to start back up. And I'm not saying this is right for them to do this. They're just stating this fact that the daily sacrifice is going to be starting at right around this point, right at the beginning, somewhere right close to the beginning of this 7-year period. Because remember, we're not going to know really when we're in this end times until that abomination desolation. That's when we'll know. Yeah, when we see the Antichrist saying that he's God and he's setting up this image, then we're going to know for sure that this is the end, my friends. So when this stuff starts, we're not going to really know. You know, they may be doing it in secret. Who knows what they're going to be doing. Remember, the tabernacle could be set up as a tent. And Eli, when Eli was a priest in 1 Samuel, it calls the tabernacle a temple. So it doesn't have to be this stone building that they have to build for 46 years. It could just be a tent. It could be a tent that they're doing this thing in, a tabernacle with posts and boards and all this other stuff. So that's at 2,300 days where the sanctuary is going to be cleansed. Now you may say, well, what's it talking about the sanctuary being cleansed? Well, in Revelation 11, go to Revelation 11, we'll see some more timelines, and it's all matching up. But this sanctuary, why is it being cleansed? Because it's being trodden underfoot for 3.5 years. So Revelation 11, we get into some more stuff that's going on at the end of these at this second half here. So I'm going to erase some of this just to give me some more room here. Again, if you want a beautiful chart, then I suggest that one, not this one. So we see that 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary is going to be cleansed right here, because it says that in verse 1 of Revelation 11, it says, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months." So I believe that when this abomination of desolation happens, the temple is being, or the city is being trodden underfoot for that same amount of time. Does that make sense? As soon as he sets up that abomination of desolation, this is where this trotting underfoot. Remember, that's when they're fleeing into the mountains, and he says, you know, don't even go down into your house to get your clothes, just go, right? And pray that you're not leaving on the Sabbath or in the winter, or your flights in the Sabbath or in the winter time. And so we had this 42 months, and then it says in verse 14, "And he said unto me, unto 2,300," or I'm sorry, verse, I was in the wrong verse there. Verse 3 there, it says, "And I will give unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth." Now, so we see this 42 month of trotting underfoot, and then we see the 1,260 days. See, it's all interchangeable. So just know that all that's interchangeable. God's using that for a reason, I believe that. So people don't get up here and say that 1,260 is not really a days, literal 24-hour days, and that these are actually years. Because when you use them interchangeable like that, that would be ludicrous. How do you reconcile that? What are the 42 months? What would those represent, you know? And so the witnesses are going to start from the abomination of desolation. Now, we'll get into the 2 witnesses eventually, who I believe they are. But their ministry is to witness in Jerusalem for that whole period of time while it's being trodden underfoot. Do you remember, we talked about when did they die? Right before the 7th trumpet sounds. We talked about, I forget what sermon, maybe it's the overview of Revelation, where we're talking about that in that chapter, in chapter 11, that they were going to die. 3.5 days later, they're going to rise. The same hour, the city fell or broken into 3 parts, and then the second woe was ended, which was the 6th trumpet. And it says the 3rd woe cometh quickly, and the 7th trumpet sounds. So when they die, when their ministry's done, it's exactly when that 42 months ends of the trotting underfoot, and it's exactly when the 42 months of the Antichrist having power ends. And that's when the 7th trumpet sounds, and that's where you have the Battle of Armageddon, you have the Babylon being destroyed, and everything that would happen from Satan being cast into the prison, and then we go into the 1,000-year reign after that. So I know it's a lot of information going into all this. if you want to see that, yeah, I mean, we talked about this, but just to kind of prove that when their testimony ends, that's at the very end here. So their witness is going from the abomination and desolation to the sixth trumpet ending, which is 42 months, 1260 days. And so in Revelation 11, verse 7, it says, "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them. And after 3 days and a half the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. In the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. And the earthquake was, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." And literally the next verse is when the seventh trumpet sounds. So all this stuff fits together. And what's really interesting about this number right here and these two numbers right here is it destroys preterism. Amen. It destroys this notion, this stupid idea that Luke 21 is talking about 70 AD. So I want to show you that. This is kind of a side note, but it's something that I want to get out there, that when we talk about these numbers right here, it proves that the preterist idea that Luke 21 is talking about the destruction of the temple back in 70 AD is a bunch of garbage.
Right.
So turn to Luke 21. Luke 21. So we know, when you look at Luke 21, Matthew 24, Mark 13, they're all parallel passages. But Luke 21 is definitely a little less clear than Matthew 24 and Mark 13. I mean, it's just it's kind of going in a different angle and talking about it. It's not as like boom, 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 this is happening, or really kind of being clear about it. And so it's a little more cryptic, but it's still the same events. It's just kind of saying it in a different manner. And so, but I just want to show you this because this is something that comes up a lot where, 70 AD is when the temple was destroyed. That's the abomination desolation. That's when all this stuff happened. I mean, first of all, you got to think to yourself, did all the trumpets and the vials get poured out? Like, where's Jesus? Like, he has to come back somewhere in there. And so it's dumb. But even like the half preterist view of like the temple being destroyed and that's the abomination desolation, there is nothing in history that would tell you that. Nothing in history, let alone the Bible, that would tell you that 70 AD is the abomination and desolation. And so I would take Antiochus Epiphanes back in the Grecian Empire as being the actual abomination and desolation that Jesus was talking about before I would say 70 AD was the abomination and desolation. Because at least there's some kind of proof or some kind of like warrant for that. But this 70 AD preterist view is stupid. And so I'm going to prove to you that Luke 21 is talking about the future destruction of Jerusalem, the future way after 70 AD. And so Luke 21 verse 20. Luke 21 verse 20. It says, "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh." Now, if you couple this with Matthew 24 and Mark 13, you'll know it's talking about the abomination and desolation. "Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Now first, what they'll say is that, well, it's the days of vengeance, there's wrath, it's God's wrath being poured upon them. Wrong. That's not what this is talking about. Because this is before God pours out his wrath. Notice what it says about the devil when he comes down before the abomination desolation, and obviously when he's going into the abomination desolation. Revelation 12:12, it says, "Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." So that's when he's first cast out, and then he's going to throw a flood at him. Then in verse 17 it says, and the dragon was wroth. What does wroth mean? It's the same thing as wrath. It's a verb for wrath. He was wroth, he was angry, and he had wrath towards him, right? He was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and of the testimony, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So whose wrath are we talking about? There's wrath upon this people from the devil, from the Antichrist. And he's coming after all the saved at this point. And so it's consistent with the Bible. But in verse 24 it says, Jerusalem shall be trodden down in the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. When are the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled? Is right here when the sanctuary is cleansed, when we see that there's going to be time no longer, according to Revelation 10, which I didn't have time to get into. And so it's talking about the fulfilling of the times of the Gentiles, because at this point, Christ is the kingdom. He is the monarch. It's his reign for 1,000 years. So this times of the Gentiles, if you were to say that this trotting underfoot has been going on since 70 AD, how does 42 months of being trodden underfoot make any sense? How does this 2,300 days make any sense that the daily sacrifice is going to be given, it's going to be taken away, and then they're going to tread under the foot Jerusalem for this period of time? That all that's going to happen within this period of time. That's less than 7 years, my friends. And this is 3.5 years. So it wouldn't make any sense if you said that was starting from 70 AD. Completely destroys preterism. Because the only way that this could work out is unless all this stuff has already happened and Revelation has happened and we're in the 1,000-year reign, which wouldn't make any sense because it's been 2,000 years since then. So preterism's dumb, and these timelines, these two timelines here with the witnesses and the trotting underfoot, destroys it. Amen. Because it can't happen. It can't fit. You can't say that 2,300 days is years, because that's what we're going to try to do, is say that. Because remember, why would God do that? Why would God give us 3 different ways to say the same time period? So that wouldn't happen. So that you couldn't confuse this as being something other than days, or this something other than months, and this something other than 3.5. Time times, that would be 2, and half a time, 0.5, right? Half. I'm an engineer mind, so I say 0.5. But anyway, so you have 3.5, 42 months, 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 3.5 years. It all fits. Now, it's a puzzle, and it's a complex puzzle. I'll give you that. It's not like I didn't figure this out overnight. You know, this is something you got to really think about and really try to figure out how this stuff lines up. But it all fits. Nothing's outside of this line. Everything makes sense. The rapture, remember, the rapture goes a little past the abomination of desolation, and we're going to be here for the abomination of desolation. But after that, it says, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And so we're going to have tribulation for about 3.5 years, or the beginning of SARS, you could call it, where you're going to have wars, rumors of wars, pestilences. And that stuff, my friends, has been going on since the beginning of the world. But I believe that it's going to be amplified here. It's going to be amplified. And then you have this period of great tribulation after the abomination of desolation, which the world has never seen. And you cannot tell me that we are in the great tribulation since 2,000 years ago. Ridiculous. If we're in the great tribulation since the world's never seen, they had it really good before us, because it's not that bad, my friends, right now. It's not. So this is the timeline. I know it's really sketchy with the way sketchy in the fact of my handwriting's horrible. But if you look at the chart over there, now when you look at these time periods, you'll see how all this stuff lines up. And yes, stuff is kind of going past it, and it's coming this way a little bit. Like this one right here doesn't, but that's what's going on. It's just kind of giving you more information at different angles, from different points of view, and it's all the same. 3.5 years of beginning of sorrows, all these, the first 5 or 4 seals, and then the abomination of desolation is pretty much in the middle of that. Then you're going to have the 5th seal that's opened, where there's going to be martyrs of Jesus, and they're going to be crying out, how long, Lord, holy and true, dost thou not avenge our blood? Jesus is going to come back. That 6th seal's opened. Sun and moon are darkened. The stars of heaven are falling. Jesus comes in the clouds, and we're raptured out. Boom, it's his turn. It's time for wrath to be poured out for this rest of this 42 months until we come down on white horses and and we come down with two-edged swords in our hands, and we're going to, then all the marriage supper of the Lamb's in there. We're not going to be eating biscuits and gravy, my friend. We're not going to be passing around the rolls and butter. We're going to have two-edged swords in our hands. Jesus Christ is going to come down with a vesture dipped in blood, and we're going to execute judgment upon all the ungodly on this world, and the fowls of heaven are going to feast on their flesh. That's the finale. That's how his end is going to be. And he's going to be destroyed without hand. So he's going to overcome us for a little bit. And then our Savior is going to come and completely annihilate him and his whole army. And then that's when you get into the 1,000-year reign after that. So hopefully that all makes sense. I know it's deep. I know we kind of were a little short tonight because it's more just a timeline. We did the overview of Revelation. So we kind of went through that, how you can read that. This is the overview of the timeline of end times events. We're going to go into more detail when we get into what's going on right here. What's going on with the tribulation and the great tribulation. Then we'll get into the wrath. Then we'll get into the witnesses. So we're going to break this up and talk more about, in specific detail, these different events. But I want you to see the big picture. When are the witnesses there? Well, they're not there until after the abomination of desolation. When is it going to be trodden underfoot? After the abomination of desolation. When's the sacrifices going to start again? Because that's a big question everybody has. It's going to happen a little bit into that 7-year period. So it's not going on for years and years and years before the 7-year period starts. So this is a little bit of information that it gives you as far as it knew that the sacrifices were going to stop in Daniel. Why would it say that the sacrifices were going to start again? And that it's going to last for 2,300 years, or 300 days. Now I'm saying years. Good night. I got it in my head. So for 2,300 days, that those sacrifices are going to be given. And it's not going to be for that whole period because it's going to stop. And then the abomination of desolation happens. And then within that 2,300 days of that period, you're going to have the desolation for 42 months. So it all fits together. If you get anything, know that these things are all the same. This is all 3.5 years. When you read through Daniel, read through Revelation, know that those are the same periods of time. They're all 3.5 years. So, and I know that gets confusing. You're trying to figure it out. 42 months, you're doing the math in your head. What is that? Yeah, once you get past that and you realize those are all 3.5 years, when you read it, you're just seeing 3.5 years. You're not reading 1,203 score days. Like those numbers can be daunting. When you see 200,000, the way it says it, you're like, what? 200,000? Oh, 200 million. Now you can understand what it's saying. And so with these numbers, sometimes it's just good just to write them out. Write out those numbers. The 666, how does it say it? 600, 3 score and 6, right? So it's not written 666. They didn't write numbers in your Bible. And so just write out the numbers and it'll help you understand that. Know that preterism is retarded. Amen. If you get anything out of the sermon tonight, preterism is dumb. And it doesn't fit with the timeline. It doesn't fit with any of the numbers that they give us. 70 AD, yeah, I'll bite. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. Fine, that's fine. I don't care when it was destroyed. But all the stuff in Revelation is stuff that is yet to happen. It's the hereafter. It's something that hasn't happened yet. So notice that it doesn't say the temple is going to be destroyed when this happens. It says it's going to be trodden underfoot. It's going to be cleansed, though. So in order for the sanctuary to be cleansed, there has to be a sanctuary there. It's a little different than 70 AD, isn't it? So anyway, I want to get off that. I could rant and rave about the preterism garbage all night long. But Daniel's 70th week. It's the last 7 years that's spoken of the prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. It's a 7-year period where the Antichrist is going to be doing confirming his covenant. He's not going to be in full power until the middle of that week or the midst of that week. Then he's going to be in full power over the whole earth for 42 months for the rest of that week. And so we're going to be in that up to a certain point until God shortens those days and he's going to come back and save us out of it. And so that not all of us die. So if you have any questions, come up to me later. But we're going to be getting into more detail, so don't worry. We'll talk about all this stuff. We're going to talk about this in a little more detail. And so anyway, let's end with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for today. Thank you for everybody that came out. And Lord, just pray that you be with us as we go home tonight. And Lord, just give us safe travels. And Lord, just pray that you bless everybody here. And Lord, we love you. And pray else in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.